Young nurse cares for a CEO in a vegetative state, but everything changes when he suddenly wakes up. The soft hum of medical equipment filled the sterile air of room 301 at St. Mary's Private Hospital. The faint scent of antiseptic lingered in the room, mingling with the occasional aroma of fresh flowers left by visitors who had long stopped coming. In the center of the room, surrounded by machines that monitored every beat of his heart and every breath he took, lay Alex Carter, once a towering figure in the world of real estate. Alex had built an empire from the ground up, earning him the title of the king of skyscrapers. But now he was just a man, still and silent, trapped in a coma after a devastating car accident 6 months ago. Mia Thompson adjusted her gloves as she prepared to change Alex's bandages. At 25, Mia had been a nurse for only 3 years, but her dedication and compassion made her stand out among her peers. She approached every patient with care, believing that no matter how hopeless a situation seemed, her presence could make a difference. And Alex's case was the most challenging she had faced yet. His family, wealthy and influential, had spared no expense to ensure he received the best medical care, but their faith in his recovery had long since dwindled. To them, Alex was a shell of the man they once knew, but to Mia, he was still there, somewhere beneath the stillness. As she gently cleaned the wounds on his arms and adjusted the sheets, Mia spoke softly, as she did every day. "Well, Alex," she began, her voice light, "you wouldn't believe the morning I had. The coffee machine broke again, and I swear the universe is conspiring against me having caffeine." She chuckled to herself, even though she knew there would be no response. "But don't worry, I saved you from hearing me complain for too long." Talking to him had become second nature. It filled the silence, made the room feel less like a waiting tomb and more like a space where life still lingered. She told him about her day, her frustrations, the little victories, and sometimes even her fears. She wasn't sure why she felt so connected to him, but something about Alex's peaceful, unmoving face made her believe he was listening. Mia had always been drawn to helping others. Growing up in a small foster home, she had learned early on the value of compassion and resilience. Her parents had passed away in a car accident when she was just a child, leaving her to navigate the world on her own. Despite the odds, she had worked tirelessly to become a nurse, driven by a desire to make a difference in people's lives. And now, standing in this quiet room, she felt that same drive more than ever. Just as she was about to finish adjusting the IV, the sharp sound of high heels clicking against the polished floor echoed through the hallway, growing louder until the door swung open with a force that rattled the walls. Victoria Carter, Alex's older sister, swept into the room like a cold wind. She was a woman who wore her wealth like armor, her designer clothes impeccable, her perfectly styled hair not a strand out of place, but her eyes, a piercing shade of ice blue, held no warmth. Mia straightened instinctively, masking her surprise. "What are you doing?" Victoria's voice was sharp, laced with disdain as her gaze swept over Mia, landing on the gentle way her hands rested on Alex's arm. Mia removed her gloves calmly, placing them in the bin before turning to face Victoria. "I'm changing his bandages, Ms. Carter." Victoria's lips curled into a sneer. "I didn't ask what you were doing. I asked why you were the one doing it. I told the hospital I wanted the best for my brother, not some novice nurse playing caretaker." Mia's jaw tightened, but she kept her tone steady. "I understand your concern, but I'm assigned to Mr. Carter's care because I'm qualified to be here. I treat all my patients with the utmost care, regardless of their status." Victoria stepped closer, her heels clicking ominously against the tile. "You may fool the others with your sweet little bedside manner, but I see right through you. You're here because you're cheap, convenient, and expendable. Do your job and keep your personal feelings out of it. My brother doesn't need your sympathy." Mia clenched her fists at her sides, willing herself to stay composed. She took a deep breath, meeting Victoria's icy glare with quiet strength. "I'm here to help your brother," Mia said firmly. "Whether you believe it or not, I will continue to care for him with the respect and dignity he deserves. I won't abandon him just because it's easier to give up." For a moment, Victoria's eyes flickered, as if Mia's words had struck a nerve, but just as quickly the steel returned to her gaze. "We'll see how long that lasts," she muttered, before turning on her heel and sweeping out of the room, leaving a trail of tension in her wake. The door clicked shut, and the silence settled back over the room like a heavy blanket. Mia let out a slow breath, turning back to Alex. She smoothed the sheets over his chest, her hands lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "I'm sorry about that," she whispered, her voice softer now. "Your sisters, well, you know." She pulled a chair up to his bedside and sat down, resting her elbows on her knees. The room hummed with the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, a sound that had become oddly comforting over time. "You know, I don't care what she says," Mia continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I believe you're still in there, fighting, and I'm not going anywhere, Alex, I promise." As she sat there, the only sound was the beeping of the machines and the quiet, steady breathing of the man in the bed. But somewhere deep in the recesses of Alex's mind, something stirred a faint flicker of awareness. Mia didn't know it yet, but her words were more than just a one-sided conversation. They were a lifeline, pulling Alex closer to the surface, closer to the world he had left behind, and soon, everything would change. Days turned into weeks, and Mia found herself settling into a routine that revolved around Alex's care. Each morning she would arrive at the hospital before dawn, the quiet halls echoing with her footsteps as she made her way to room 301. The world outside was still asleep, but inside, Mia was determined to bring a spark of life back to Alex. As she entered the room, the familiar sight of Alex lying motionless greeted her. The machines beeped steadily, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. Mia took a moment to gather her thoughts, reminding herself of the importance of her role. She believed that every word she spoke, every story she shared, could reach him in ways she couldn't yet understand. "Good morning, Alex," she said cheerfully, pulling up a chair beside his bed. "I hope you're ready for another day of my terrible jokes," she smiled, trying to lighten the atmosphere. "Did you hear about the claustrophobic astronaut? He just needed a little space." Mia chuckled at her own joke, the sound filling the room. She began her routine, checking his vitals and changing his bandages with practiced ease. As she worked, she continued to talk, sharing snippets of her life, her dreams, and her struggles. "You know, I always wanted to travel the world. I dream of visiting Paris and seeing the Eiffel Tower. But I guess I'll have to settle for the view from this room for now," she said, glancing out the window at the city skyline. With each passing day, Mia felt a growing connection to Alex. She shared her hopes and fears, her laughter and tears, believing that somehow he could hear her. She often found herself lost in thought, imagining what it would be like if he woke up. Would he remember her? Would he appreciate the bond they had formed in this strange, silent way? One afternoon, as she recounted a particularly funny story about her childhood, Mia noticed something unusual. As she spoke, she saw a flicker of movement in Alex's fingers. Her heart raced as she leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. "Alex, did you just move?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment there was silence. Then, to her astonishment, she saw it again, a slight twitch, almost imperceptible but undeniably there. "Oh my God, Alex, can you hear me?" she exclaimed, her excitement bubbling over. "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand." Mia reached out, gently taking his hand in hers. She felt a warmth radiate from his skin, and for the first time in weeks, hope surged within her. She waited, her heart pounding in anticipation, and then it happened. A faint squeeze, barely noticeable, but it was enough to send a wave of joy crashing over her. "Alex, you're really in there," she cried, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. "I knew you could hear me. I knew you were fighting." In that moment the room transformed. The sterile environment faded away, replaced by a sense of possibility and hope. Mia felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to keep talking to him, to keep sharing her life and to help him find his way back. As the days passed, Mia continued to nurture this newfound connection. She brought in photographs of her family, sharing stories about her childhood and the challenges she had faced. She told him about her dreams of becoming a nurse and how she had fought to overcome her past. Each story was a thread, weaving a tapestry of their bond, one that transcended the barriers of consciousness. Mia also began to notice subtle changes in Alex's condition. His breathing seemed steadier, and the color in his cheeks appeared healthier. She couldn't help but wonder if her words were reaching him, if he was responding to her in ways she couldn't yet see. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the window, Mia sat by Alex's side, recounting her favorite memories. "You know, Alex, I used to love going to the beach with my friends. We'd build sand castles and splash in the waves. I can't wait to do that again," she said, her voice filled with longing. "I want to take you there one day, just you and me, feeling the sand between our toes." As she spoke, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. In that moment, she realized that her dedication to Alex was more than just a job. It was a calling. She was determined to be the light in his darkness, the voice that would guide him back to life. Mia's unwavering commitment to Alex's care became a beacon of hope, not just for her, but for everyone around her. She believed in the power of connection, the strength of love, and the possibility of miracles. And as she continued to share her heart with him, she knew that together they were embarking on a journey that would change both their lives forever. The hospital room was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and the soft rustle of papers as Mia jotted down notes on Alex's chart. It had been another long day, but she didn't mind. Caring for Alex had become more than just a job. It was a mission. She believed with every fiber of her being that he was still there, fighting to return to the world, and she was determined to help him find his way back. As the evening sun cast golden rays through the window, Mia sat by Alex's bedside, her voice filling the room with warmth. "You know, Alex," she began, her tone light, "I've been thinking about what you'd say if you could talk to me right now. Would you tell me to stop rambling? Or maybe you'd laugh at my terrible jokes. Either way, I think you'd have a lot to say." She paused, studying his face. His features were strong, even in stillness, and there was a quiet dignity about him that made her believe he was listening. "I know it must be frustrating," she continued, her voice softening, "being stuck like this, unable to move or speak. But I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Mia reached for his hand, her fingers brushing against his. It was a small gesture, but one that had become a ritual for her. She liked to think that her touch could remind him he wasn't alone, that someone cared deeply for him. "You're not just a patient to me, Alex," she whispered. You're important, and I believe in you." As the words left her lips, something extraordinary happened. Mia felt a faint pressure against her hand, a slight, almost imperceptible squeeze. Her breath caught in her throat, and she froze, unsure if what she had felt was real. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling, "did you just—" She stared at his hand, willing it to move again. For a moment, there was nothing, and she began to doubt herself. Maybe it had been her imagination, a trick of her mind born from weeks of hope and longing. But then, it happened again. A gentle squeeze, stronger this time, as if Alex was trying to tell her something. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as a wave of emotion crashed over her. "Oh my God, Alex," she exclaimed, her voice breaking. "You can hear me, can't you? You're still in there." Her heart raced as she leaned closer, her hands trembling with excitement. "If you can hear me, Alex, do it again. Squeeze my hand one more time." She waited, her eyes locked on his face, searching for any sign of recognition. And then, slowly but surely, she felt it. A deliberate, unmistakable squeeze. Mia let out a laugh, a sound filled with both joy and disbelief. "You're amazing," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I knew it. I knew you were still fighting." She quickly pressed the call button to alert the medical team, her mind racing with possibilities. Could this be the breakthrough they had all been waiting for? Was Alex finally beginning to wake up? The thought filled her with hope, but also a sense of urgency. She needed to make sure he received the care he needed to continue this progress. Within minutes, a team of doctors and nurses entered the room, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Mia explained what had happened, her words tumbling out in a rush. "He squeezed my hand," she said, her voice firm. "Twice. It wasn't a reflex, it was deliberate." Dr. Harris, the lead physician, approached Alex's bedside, his face calm but doubtful. "Let's see," he said, taking Alex's hand in his own. "Alex, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand." The room fell silent as everyone held their breath, waiting for a response. For a moment, nothing happened, and Mia felt her heart sink. But then, just as she was about to speak, Alex's fingers twitched, curling slightly around the doctor's hand. Dr. Harris's eyes widened, and a murmur of astonishment rippled through the room. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, a rare smile breaking across his face. "It seems we've got a fighter here." Mia's chest swelled with pride as she watched the medical team spring into action, running tests and adjusting Alex's treatment plan. She knew this was just the beginning, but it was a monumental step forward. Alex was waking up, and she had been there to witness it. As the commotion died down and the room emptied, Mia sat back down beside Alex, her hand resting gently on his. "You did it," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. "You're coming back to us." She leaned closer, her eyes shining with determination. "I don't know how long this will take, but I'm not giving up on you, Alex. Not now. Not ever." In the quiet that followed, Mia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had always believed in the power of connection, and now she had proof that her words and actions mattered. Alex was fighting his way back to the world, and she would be there every step of the way, guiding him with her unwavering faith and compassion. The morning light filtered through the blinds of room 311, casting soft golden streaks across the walls. Mia sat in her usual spot by Alex's bedside, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. She had barely slept the night before, her mind replaying the moment Alex had squeezed her hand. It was a small gesture, but it had ignited a fire of hope within her. She couldn't stop thinking about what might come next. "Good morning, Alex," she said, her voice warm and cheerful. "I hope you're ready for another day of me talking your ear off. I've got a lot to say today, so you'd better be listening." She set her coffee down and leaned forward, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You know, I've been thinking about what you must be dreaming about in there. Are you on a beach somewhere, sipping a fancy drink? Or maybe you're climbing one of those skyscrapers you used to build. Whatever it is, I hope it's something good." Mia reached for his hand, her fingers curling gently around his. It had become a habit, a way to remind herself and him that he wasn't alone. "I know you're still in there, Alex," she whispered, "and I'm going to keep talking to you until you come back to us." As she spoke, she noticed something unusual. Alex's breathing, which had always been steady but shallow, seemed deeper today. His chest rose and fell with a rhythm that felt different. Mia's heart skipped a beat as she leaned closer, her eyes scanning his face for any sign of movement. "Alex," she said softly, her voice trembling with anticipation. "If you can hear me, give me a sign. Anything." For a moment there was nothing but the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Mia's shoulders sagged slightly and she let out a quiet sigh. Maybe she was reading too much into things. Maybe she was just desperate to see progress. But then, it happened. Alex's eyelids fluttered, just for a second, but enough to make Mia freeze in place. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Did you just—" She leaned closer, her eyes fixed on his face. Slowly, as if it took every ounce of strength he had. Alex's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, blinking against the harsh light of the room, but they were open. For the first time in 6 months, Alex Carter was awake. Mia's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks as a wave of emotion overwhelmed her. "Oh my God, Alex," she choked out, her voice trembling. "You're awake. Alex's gaze shifted slowly, his eyes landing on Mia. They were filled with confusion and exhaustion, but there was something else there too. Recognition. He didn't speak, but the way he looked at her said everything. He knew her. He had heard her. Mia reached for the call button, her hands shaking as she pressed it. Within moments, the room was filled with the sound of hurried footsteps as doctors and nurses rushed in. Dr. Harris was the first to reach Alex's bedside, his expression a mix of shock and excitement. "He's awake," Mia said, her voice thick with emotion. "He opened his eyes." Dr. Harris leaned over Alex, shining a small flashlight into his eyes to check his pupils. "Alex, can you hear me?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. "If you can, blink once for yes." Alex's eyelids fluttered, and then he blinked once, slowly but deliberately. The room erupted into a flurry of activity as the medical team began running tests, checking his vitals and adjusting his treatment plan. Mia stepped back, giving them space to work, but her eyes never left Alex. She couldn't stop smiling, her heart swelling with pride and relief. As the commotion died down, Dr. Harris turned to Mia, his expression one of cautious optimism. "This is a remarkable step forward," he said, "but it's just the beginning. He's going to need a lot of care and therapy to fully recover." Mia nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "I'll be here," she said firmly. "Whatever he needs, I'll be here." When the room finally cleared, leaving just Mia and Alex once again, she pulled her chair closer to his bed. His eyes were still open, watching her with a mix of curiosity and gratitude. She reached for his hand, holding it gently in hers. "Hi, Alex," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's me, Mia. I've been talking to you every day, and I guess you finally decided to listen, huh?" A faint smile tugged at the corners of Alex's lips, and Mia let out a laugh, the sound filled with joy and relief. "You're going to be okay," she said, her voice steady now. "We're going to get through this together." For the first time in months, the room felt alive. The machines still beeped, the sunlight still streamed through the window, but everything was different now. Alex was awake, and Mia knew that this was the start of something extraordinary. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and she would be there every step of the way. The days following Alex's awakening were a whirlwind of activity. Doctors and therapists came and went, running tests, monitoring his progress, and setting up a rigorous rehabilitation plan. Alex's body, weakened from months of immobility, had a long road to recovery ahead. But despite the challenges, there was a spark in his eyes, a determination that hadn't been there before. And through it all, Mia remained by his side. "All right, Alex," Mia said one morning, her voice light and encouraging as she adjusted the pillows behind his back. "Today's the day we start working on those muscles. No more lying around and letting me do all the work." Alex gave her a faint smile, his lips curving slightly. Though he still couldn't speak, his expressions had become more animated, and his eyes often followed Mia as she moved around the room. It was as if he was trying to communicate with her in his own way. Mia pulled up a chair beside his bed, holding a small stress ball in her hand. "Okay, let's start with something simple," she said, placing the ball in his palm. "I want you to squeeze this as hard as you can. Don't worry if it's not much at first. We'll get there." Alex's fingers twitched around the ball, his brow furrowing in concentration. It was a small movement, but it was progress, and Mia's face lit up with pride. "That's it!" she exclaimed. "You're doing great, Alex. Keep going." As the days turned into weeks, Alex's strength slowly began to return. He could now lift his hand slightly, and his grip on the stress ball grew firmer with each passing day. The physical therapists were impressed with his progress, but it was Mia who saw the deeper transformation. Alex wasn't just regaining his physical abilities, he was reconnecting with the world around him. One afternoon, as Mia helped him practice moving his fingers, she noticed him staring at her intently. "What is it?" she asked, tilting her head. "Do I have something on my face?" Alex's lips twitched, and for a moment Mia thought he might actually laugh. Instead, he lifted his hand slightly, his fingers brushing against hers. The gesture was so deliberate, so full of meaning, that Mia felt her breath catch in her throat. "You're welcome," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "But you don't have to thank me, Alex. I'm just doing my job." Still, the connection between them was undeniable. Mia found herself looking forward to her shifts more than ever, eager to see Alex's progress and to share her day with him. She told him about everything: her favorite books, the funny things her coworkers said, even the little frustrations of hospital life. And though Alex couldn't respond with words, his eyes spoke volumes. They were filled with warmth, gratitude, and something else Mia couldn't quite name. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the room, Mia sat by Alex's bedside, reading aloud from a book she had brought. It was a novel about adventure and resilience, themes that seemed fitting for Alex's journey. As she read, she glanced up occasionally to see his reaction. His eyes were fixed on her, his expression soft and attentive. "You like this, don't you?" she asked, lowering the book slightly. "I'll bring more stories like this if you want. Just blink once for yes." Alex blinked, slow and deliberate, and Mia couldn't help but laugh. "All right, it's a deal," she said, her smile widening. "But you owe me one when you're back on your feet. I expect you to tell me all about your adventures in the real estate world. I bet you've got some incredible stories." At the mention of his career, Alex's expression shifted slightly. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, pride perhaps, or maybe a hint of sadness. Mia reached out, placing her hand gently over his. "Hey," she said softly, "you're going to get back to that life. I know it feels far away right now, but you're stronger than you think, and I'll be here to remind you of that every step of the way." As the weeks went on, their bond deepened. Alex began to participate more actively in his therapy sessions, his progress accelerating with each passing day. The medical staff often commented on his determination, but Mia knew there was more to it than that. Alex wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for the connection they had built, for the life he wanted to reclaim. One day, as Mia helped him practice sitting up in bed, Alex reached for the notepad and pen that had been left on the bedside table. His movements were slow and shaky, but he managed to scrawl a single word across the page. "Thank you." Mia's eyes filled with tears as she read the words. She looked up at Alex, her heart swelling with emotion. "You don't have to thank me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've done all the hard work. I'm just here to cheer you on." But deep down she knew it was more than that. Their connection had become something extraordinary, something that went beyond the boundaries of patient and caregiver. They were partners now, working together to overcome the impossible. And as Mia looked into Alex's eyes, she realized that this journey was changing her just as much as it was changing him. The progress Alex had made in the weeks since his awakening was nothing short of remarkable. He could now sit up in bed with minimal assistance. His hands were regaining strength, and he had even begun to form faint, whispered words. For Mia, every small victory felt like a triumph, and she couldn't help but feel proud of how far Alex had come. But not everyone shared her enthusiasm. Victoria Carter, Alex's older sister, had been a constant presence in the hospital since his awakening. Her visits were always brief and businesslike, her demeanor cold and distant. While Mia had grown used to Victoria's sharp remarks and disapproving glances, she could sense that something was brewing beneath the surface, something that would soon come to a head. It happened one afternoon just as Mia was helping Alex with his physical therapy exercises. She had been encouraging him to lift a small weight, her voice filled with warmth and encouragement. "You're doing great, Alex," she said, her smile bright. Just one more rep and we'll call it a win for today. Alex grunted softly, his hand trembling as he lifted the weight one last time before letting it drop onto the bed. He looked at Mia, his lips curving into a faint smile, and she laughed. "See? I told you you're stronger than you think." The moment was interrupted by the sharp click of heels against the tile floor. Mia turned to see Victoria standing in the doorway, her arms crossed and her expression as icy as ever. "Well," Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's nice to see my brother being treated like a circus act." Mia straightened, her smile fading. "Miss Carter," she said politely, "Alex is making incredible progress. I'm aware of his progress," Victoria interrupted, stepping further into the room. "And I'm also aware of how much time you've been spending with him. Far more than is necessary for a nurse, wouldn't you say?" Mia's jaw tightened, but she kept her tone calm. "I'm here to support Alex in his recovery. That's my job." Victoria's eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking between Mia and Alex. "Your job?" she repeated, her voice laced with disdain. "Let's not pretend this is just about your job, Miss Thompson. I've seen the way you look at him, the way you talk to him. You're overstepping your boundaries." Mia felt a flush of anger rise in her chest, but she refused to let it show. "With all due respect, Ms. Carter, I care about Alex's well-being. That's why I'm here." Victoria let out a cold laugh, shaking her head. "Oh, I'm sure you care, but let's be honest, shall we? You see an opportunity here, a wealthy, vulnerable man who's grateful for your attention. It's a classic story, really." The accusation hit Mia like a slap to the face. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Before she could gather herself, Alex's voice, weak but firm, broke the tension. Both women turned to look at him. Alex's face was pale, but his eyes burned with determination. "Victoria," he said, his voice hoarse. "Enough." Victoria's expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Alex, I'm just trying to protect you," she said, her tone softening slightly. "You don't know what's been happening while you've been gone." "I know enough," Alex replied, his voice gaining strength. He looked at Mia, his eyes filled with gratitude. "She's been here for me, every day, when no one else was." Mia felt her throat tighten, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She looked away, not wanting to cry in front of Victoria. Victoria's face hardened again, her gaze shifting back to Mia. "I'm not convinced her intentions are as pure as you think," she said coldly, "and I won't stand by while someone takes advantage of my brother." "That's enough," Alex said, his voice firm despite its weakness. "Mia has done more for me than anyone else. If you can't see that, then maybe you shouldn't be here." Victoria's eyes widened, and for a moment she looked genuinely hurt, but she quickly masked it with a glare, turning on her heel and storming out of the room without another word. The silence that followed was heavy, and Mia struggled to find her voice. "Alex," she said finally, her tone hesitant, "you didn't have to do that." Alex turned his head to look at her, his expression softening. "Yes, I did," he said quietly. "You've been here for me, Mia. You've believed in me when no one else did. I won't let her treat you like that." Mia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, offering him a small smile. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot." For the rest of the day, Mia couldn't shake the weight of Victoria's words. While she knew her intentions were pure, the accusation had struck a nerve. She cared deeply for Alex, more than she had ever expected to. But was that wrong? Was she crossing a line? As she left the hospital that evening, her mind was filled with questions she couldn't yet answer. All she knew was that her connection with Alex was real, and she wasn't ready to let it go. The tension between Mia and Victoria lingered in the days that followed their confrontation. Though Victoria's visits became less frequent, her disapproval hung in the air like a storm cloud. Mia tried to focus on Alex's recovery, pouring her energy into his therapy sessions and celebrating every small victory. But deep down, she couldn't shake the doubt Victoria had planted in her mind. Was she overstepping? Was her connection with Alex inappropriate? Alex, however, seemed more determined than ever. His progress was accelerating, and his voice, though still weak, was growing stronger. He often used it to reassure Mia, sensing her unease. "Don't listen to her," he would say, his words slow but deliberate. "You've been my strength." Mia would smile and nod, but the uncertainty lingered. She cared for Alex deeply, more than she had ever expected to, and while she tried to keep her feelings in check, she couldn't deny the bond they had formed. It was something she had never experienced before, and it scared her as much as it thrilled her. One afternoon, as Mia helped Alex practice walking with the aid of a physical therapist, he paused, leaning heavily on the parallel bars. "Mia," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks, "I need to do something." Mia frowned, stepping closer to support him. "What is it, Alex? Are you okay?" He nodded, his eyes locking onto hers with a determination that took her breath away. "I need to speak to everyone." The physical therapist raised an eyebrow, glancing at Mia for guidance. "That's a big step, Alex," Mia said gently. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Alex's grip on the bars tightened, his knuckles turning white. "I'm ready," he said firmly. "It's important." Though she didn't fully understand what he had in mind, Mia nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll make it happen." A week later, the hospital's small conference room was filled with staff, patients, and a few members of Alex's family, including Victoria. Word had spread about Alex's remarkable recovery, and everyone was eager to hear from the man who had defied the odds. Mia stood off to the side, her heart pounding as she watched Alex being wheeled into the room. He had insisted on walking to the podium, and though it took every ounce of strength he had, he managed to stand with the help of a cane. The room fell silent as Alex gripped the edges of the podium, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. His voice, though still raspy, was steady as he began to speak. "Thank you all for being here," he said, pausing to catch his breath. "I wouldn't be standing here today without the incredible care I've received." He went on to thank the doctors, nurses, and therapists who had supported him throughout his recovery. But as he spoke, his eyes kept drifting toward Mia, who stood quietly in the corner, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "There's one person," Alex continued, his voice growing stronger, "who deserves more thanks than I can ever give. Someone who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Someone who never gave up on me." Mia's breath caught in her throat as Alex's gaze locked onto hers. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them. "Mia," Alex said, his voice filled with emotion, "you saved me, not just my body, but my spirit. You gave me hope when I had none, and I need everyone to know how much you mean to me." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Mia felt her cheeks flush as all eyes turned toward her. She wanted to shrink into the floor, but Alex wasn't finished. "I know, some people don't understand," he said, his gaze briefly flicking to Victoria before returning to Mia. "But I don't care. Mia, you're more than my nurse. You're my friend, my everything." Tears streamed down Mia's face as Alex's words sank in. She had never expected this, never imagined that he would make such a public declaration. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity and love. The room erupted into applause, but Mia barely heard it. She crossed the room, her legs trembling, until she was standing in front of Alex. "Alex," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said, his voice steadied despite the tears glistening in his eyes. "You've been there for me every step of the way, and I need you to know how much you mean to me." Mia reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his. "You mean the world to me too," she said softly, her voice breaking. "But it's not about me. It's about you. You're the one who fought to come back. You're the one who's incredible." Alex smiled, his grip on her hand tightening. "I couldn't have done it without you." As the applause died down and the crowd began to disperse, Victoria approached, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Mia braced herself for another confrontation, but instead, Victoria sighed and extended her hand. "I may not like it," she said quietly, her tone begrudging but sincere, "but I can't deny what you've done for my brother. Thank you." Mia hesitated, then shook Victoria's hand. "I only did what anyone would do," she said modestly. Victoria shook her head. "No," she said firmly, "you did more." As Victoria walked away, Mia turned back to Alex, who was watching her with a look of pure admiration. In that moment, she realized that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Their bond had been forged in the hardest of times, and nothing, not even Victoria's disapproval, could break it. The days following Alex's public declaration were a whirlwind of emotions for both him and Mia. The hospital staff buzzed with excitement, and even the patients seemed inspired by Alex's story. But for Mia, the most profound change was the sense of clarity she now felt. Alex's words had erased any lingering doubts she had about their connection. What they shared was real, and it was worth fighting for. Still, not everyone was ready to accept their bond. Victoria remained distant, her approval half-hearted at best. Though she had thanked Mia after Alex's speech, her guarded demeanor hadn't softened entirely. Mia understood that Victoria's protectiveness came from a place of love, but it didn't make the tension any easier to bear. One evening, as Mia sat by Alex's bedside, helping him practice writing with his newly regained strength, he paused and looked at her. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice still raspy but stronger than it had been in weeks. Mia smiled faintly, setting the pen down. "Just thinking," she admitted, "about everything, about us." Alex tilted his head, his eyes searching hers. "You're worried," he said, his tone more a statement than a question. Mia hesitated, then nodded. "I know what we have is special," she said softly, "but I also know it's not going to be easy. Your family, the way people might look at us. I just don't want to make things harder for you." Alex reached for her hand, his grip firm despite the tremor in his fingers. "Mia," he said, his voice steady, "you've already made my life better. I don't care what anyone thinks, I care about you." Tears welled in Mia's eyes, and she squeezed his hand. "I care about you too," she whispered, "more than I ever thought possible." The turning point came a week later, when Alex was discharged from the hospital. It was a bittersweet moment for Mia, who had grown so accustomed to their daily routine. Though she knew Alex's recovery would continue at home, the thought of not seeing him every day left an ache in her chest. On the day of his discharge, Alex insisted on walking out of the hospital on his own, with only his cane for support. The staff gathered to cheer him on, their applause echoing through the halls as he made his way to the front doors. Mia stood off to the side, her heart swelling with pride as she watched him. As Alex reached the exit, he turned back, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Mia. "Mia," he called, his voice strong and clear, "come here." She hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, her cheeks flushing as everyone turned to watch. Alex reached for her hand, pulling her close. "I'm not leaving without you," he said, his voice filled with determination. Mia's eyes widened. "Alex, what are you—" "I mean it," he interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "You've been with me through everything. I want you by my side, not just as my nurse, but as the person I care about most." The crowd murmured in surprise, and Mia felt her cheeks grow even hotter. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling, "are you sure?" He smiled, his eyes shining with emotion. "I've never been more sure of anything." Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the moment. Well, Victoria said, stepping forward, I suppose I can't argue with that. Mia turned to see Victoria standing a few feet away, her arms crossed but her expression softer than it had been in weeks. Alex is stubborn, Victoria continued, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Once he's made up his mind, there's no changing it, and I can see how much you mean to him. Mia blinked, stunned by the unexpected shift in Victoria's tone. Miss Carter, Call me Victoria, she said, cutting her off. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I was wrong about you. You've done more for Alex than I ever could have imagined. If he's happy, then I'll support him. Mia felt a wave of relief wash over her and she nodded. Thank you, she said sincerely. That means a lot. Victoria gave a small nod, then turned to Alex. Don't make me regret this, she said, her tone teasing but affectionate. Alex chuckled, the sound still rough but full of life. I won't, he promised. In the weeks that followed, Alex and Mia's relationship blossomed. Though there were challenges adjusting to life outside the hospital, navigating the opinions of others, they faced them together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Alex continued his physical therapy, with Mia often by his side, cheering him on every step of the way. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of Alex's home, watching the sunset, he turned to her and took her hand. Mia, he said softly, I never thought I'd get a second chance at life. But you've given me that, and I don't want to waste a single moment. Mia smiled, her heart full. Neither do I, she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a warm, golden glow, they sat in comfortable silence, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Their love, forged in the hardest of times, had overcome every obstacle, and now it was stronger than ever.